Welcome into Shot and Vipp, a podcast brought to you by Inside Carolina this football season. I'm Taylor Vippolis hosting this, and as always, I'm joined by my former teammate, former Carolina football letterman, former Carolina linebacker, Jeff Schoettmer. Carolina moves to 3-0 on the year. They beat NC Central 45-10. I'd argue that final score doesn't really tell the full story of what we all watched on Saturday. But what about you? What did you think? What are opening thoughts?
Before I get to my opening thoughts, Vipp, I want to tell the viewers kind of what we're battling against right now. Number one, I'm in the hotel lobby of a St. Augustine, Florida hotel where there's no Wi-Fi. The service is spotty. I couldn't even get connection in my room, so I had to come down to the lobby. There's probably people looking around at me like, "What is this guy doing?" Little do they know I'm talking about Carolina football. Second thing we're up against, we got Burrow versus Mahomes in the fourth quarter right now, and we're recording this podcast because that's where our priorities land. So I want the viewers and listeners to know how dedicated we are to our craft and how much we love talking about Carolina football. Cause
We're finding a way.
We're finding a way. But about the game, the most telling thing is it's 17-10 at the end of the third quarter. Versus an NC Central team that is way overmatched. I mean, give them credit, but that's not what we expected to see. What I expected to see, what Coach Brown, what the staff, what the players, what the boosters, what the fans expected to see was a clean game from start to finish. When you're playing a lesser opponent, you want to focus on a couple things. One, you want to limit your penalties. You want to, no turnovers offensively. You want to get the ball defensively and, just play a true clean game. And that's not what happened. I mean, we had 16 penalties. I don't care what opponent we're playing. If we're playing Chapel Hill High or Carborough High, you cannot have 16 penalties in a collegiate football game. So regardless of how bad the referees were, we got to look ourselves in the mirror and get that corrected. I expected to see the starters out at halftime, like out of the game, not playing the second half. At worst, they play one possession in the third quarter, they're pulled. You're playing your twos and threes the majority of the second half. In a game like this, I expect for us to physically impose our will on offense, defense, special teams. There was times we did that, but obviously there was times when we didn't. And I think if you're playing an FCS opponent and they aren't a triple option team, it's never about what they do, what scheme they have, what plays they run. It's all about what you do, your physicality, your tackling, your execution on offense, your blocking, your ability to take care of the football, your ability to not get penalties. So just it wasn't a very pretty game. Even as a regular fan watching the game, you look up in the first quarter and you're like, what product is this? It wasn't an entertaining game to watch. Obviously, we turned it on in the fourth quarter, and like you said, the final score tells a little bit different story. But overall, I wasn't impressed, nor was anybody. Yes, we won the game. We're relatively healthy. There was no serious injuries. That's another thing you want to. You pray and hope any game you play, but especially an inferior opponent where you don't want to get Hampton dinged up. To see Hampton running the ball in the fourth quarter was not what I expected to see, going into the game. But, he looked healthy. He bounced back from that, I guess he had a thigh contusion last week. But he looked healthy and imposed his will on every time he ran the ball. But all in all, just ugly game. And, We'll get to the quarterback controversy. I guess that's the main storyline.
Yeah. Just to start, I think Central had the ball with 3:39 left in the third quarter, and they're only down 7 with the chance to go and tie the game. And Carolina forces essentially a 3-and-out, 5 plays, 1 yard. They get the ball back, and then Carolina scores on their next 4 straight drives, touchdowns, and kind of puts the game away and puts the game to bed. But yeah, I think the biggest takeaway watching this game was I'm having a hard time when I'm watching other teams in the ACC seeing how this North Carolina team is going to get to 500 in conference play. You watch the backyard brawl between Pitt and West Virginia, and all of a sudden it looks like Pitt has a quarterback. You're watching all these teams throughout the country, and you're like,
except Florida State.
Except Florida State, yes. Florida State is, as the more we get closer to that Florida State game, the more I'm like, oh, I could see Carolina winning that. But also the closer we get to that Pitt game and the Boston College game, I'm like, man, these games have kind of gone from toss-up to I think Carolina is going to be an underdog and a sizable underdog at that with what they have. But yeah, 16 penalties. I had that starred. 16 penalties for 102 yards. It was a sloppy game. It was a game that really didn't have much flow. I'm watching it late in the third quarter, and I was questioning myself. Why am I watching this game? Do I not have better things to do? But knowing I had to do this podcast, I stayed committed, and
You get to do this podcast.
I get to do this podcast. Yeah. But watching that game, I felt for all the Carolina fans that were watching that and expecting a different result. And I think part of it is the past 5 years, what Carolina has had offensively and the standard that's kind of come with that. But also I think what you're watching is it's not like Carolina went from the best quarterback in college football to an average offense. They went from the best quarterback in college football to like a subpar power 4 offense, and you have one of the best running backs in the country. So it's like, what is happening that this team has kind of fallen off this far, and you're kind of shifting your expectations as the season goes on. But they do win. They're 3-0. You can only control what you can control. The team in front of you, Carolina, does win. The biggest story from this game is Jacolby Criswell going into the game and playing. Mac Brown says that Criswell was going to play no matter what. He was going to get that third series no matter what. But I think the staff saw that he kind of provided a boost and rode him for a majority of the game, where he finishes 14 of 23, 161 yards passing, 1 touchdown. Connor Harrell, 2 of 6 passing, 22 yards. What did you see from both quarterbacks in this game?
So I thought, I guess the first question I have, and I don't know the answer to, and you can tell me, was Jacolby Criswell scheduled to come in the game in the third series? Do we know? I didn't listen to Mac Brown's post-game press conference, but is that?
Yeah, in the post-game, he said no matter what, Jacolby Criswell was coming in the third series.
Okay. I mean, that does make sense. Just based off my experience, I can go back to 2 games my senior year where Andre Smith was my backup, and he, was a very good player. He's still playing the NFL, and they wanted, for a game like NC, we played North Carolina A&T. They told me pregame, hey, Andre's going to play the third series because, we need to start getting him reps. We need to start throwing him in there. And then same thing with Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech was a little bit different because they wanted to get him exposure to that triple option at the time, and they wanted to, get him some live game action. So it is interesting that they threw him in the third series, but the opening 2 series from Harrell were awful. He kind of looked, the worst parts of him looked like the worst parts of him in the last game. He had nervous feet. He was erratic with his throws. He didn't, he doesn't have a natural throwing motion, in my opinion. Nervous feet. I don't think he makes the right reads. He still is making turnover-worthy throws. He should have had what should have been a pick 6, I think, on their sideline in the first 2 drives. So
he got away with a couple.
He got away with a couple. And again, this isn't us knocking the kid. It's us being objective on his performance. And we've seen flashes of him make great plays and be an athlete and have a strong arm, but just the inconsistency is not there. His, composure as the quarterback, the leader of the offense, isn't there. But give Jacolby credit for coming in there and kind of easing the nerves of the offense, because we go 2 drives and hardly move the ball with Harrell starting. Criswell comes in and leads, a touchdown drive the first possession he's in the game. I don't think any Carolina football fan, nor Coach Brown or the players, really thought after week 3 we would be deciding between Connor Harrell versus Jacolby Criswell. I don't think Jacolby, when he transferred and, was, I guess, delegated the third guy coming out of camp, like, if you're the third guy going into the season, you don't really most of those third teamers are playing scout team. They're getting 0 reps
You
during the
have one eye
season.
on next year.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll compare and contrast more of their play styles, in a little bit. But when Criswell was in the game, he's just a way more natural thrower of the football. You see more zip on his ball. He's got he can throw the route tree. A couple of his overthrows were on the deeper passes, and in my opinion, that's more timing based. Those go balls, those posts where he was widely overthrowing them, but to see him on the 10-yard outs, the 5-yard outs to the tight end, the true timing throws where you're catching the ball, retreating 1, 2, 3, timing off your back foot and throwing it, he looked like a very natural thrower of the football. I remember when I was on staff and Longo was recruiting him, he said in shorts, like, this guy reminds me of Donovan McNabb, just his arm talent. Obviously, there's a lot more that goes into the game when live bullets are thrown and there's a defense and blitzers and he's got to read coverages. But if you watch Jacolby throw routes on air, he throws as pretty of a ball as Drake or Sam. He has that type of arm talent. So we'll cut right to the chase. I mean, I personally think, and I've defended Max Johnson. I've defended the staff's decision to play Harrell. But after watching that last game, like, I obviously don't see anything in practice. I didn't see anything in fall camp. But after watching the, 2.5, 3/4 of Criswell, he should be the starter going forward. Our offense just operates much more naturally with him at the helm. He gets our tight ends involved, and that's really the strength of our offense other than our running backs. I mean, we've talked about our receivers not producing, not getting enough separation, but Criswell looks to the tight ends, and you can see their production in this game between Copenhaver and Nesbitt. They had over 100 yards and a touchdown. So I think Criswell finds the tight ends better. He is a better intermediate to short passer than Harrell, and I think that's kind of what our offense is gonna revolve around going forward, is handing the ball to Hampton, playing good defense, using our tight ends, because we really don't even have the receivers on the outside to take the top off of defense. So the deep ball isn't a huge deal. So going forward, I would personally, start Criswell. He does have some game experience. He's been around, college football. This is his 5th season, so he's seasoned. Obviously, he hasn't played or started a lot, but he's got a lot more banked reps than Connor Harrell does.
Yeah, with Harrell, I think you hit the nail on the head with his footwork and the happy feet I think he gets in a pocket, because a lot of the times when he's dropping back, he looks lost, and it looks like the game is almost moving too fast for him, and he's trying to process everything that's happening, and what you're left with is him running around in the pocket, and just that lack of pocket presence that you would normally expect from a quarterback. And I think Jacolby Criswell does bring more of that pocket presence mindset. And when you go with somebody like Connor Harrell after Max Johnson gets hurt, I think the hope for this coaching staff was that Harrell would be able to use more of the dual threat rushing ability, but we really haven't seen that make its way over to the field, and he hasn't been able to use his speed as a weapon. So I'm with you in the camp that what I saw from both quarterbacks, Criswell in this game against NC Central and Harrell through the first 2 games where he was heavily featured, I would say Criswell should be the guy moving forward, and him getting the starting reps and trying to build that timing with the wide receivers. But yeah, I think the fact that we're leaving week 3 and already having this conversation between your starting number 2 quarterback and your number 3 quarterback, and outside of Max Johnson's injury, it wasn't like Max Johnson was lighting the field up in that Minnesota game before he got hurt. So yeah, I think the quarterback room is a major concern right now for Carolina, and it's kind of taken where this team's ceiling can be and probably lowered it a good amount, because you haven't seen. I have this stat. Last year, North Carolina led the country in big time throws with Drake May. This season, through 3 weeks, zero big time throws.
Yeah.
Not one big time throw on the roster. But I do think with Jacolby Criswell, the conversation into training camp was that he was Carolina's number 3 quarterback. Had an eye on the spring. That was going to be his chance to get starting reps and try to compete for the starting job. But I do think he came back to Carolina because he looked at what Carolina had in its quarterback room in Max Johnson and Connor Harrell and was like, I'm just as talented, if not more talented than those guys. I could come back to Carolina and I could eventually win the starting quarterback job. And through 3 weeks, I think you've seen that play out on the field where you haven't been blown away by any of the quarterback performances by Carolina. No impressive performances, no big time throws, a game manager type mentality. And Harrell has kind of come in here or Criswell has come in here and shown like, okay, I can make some of the throws at least. I could be this complimentary quarterback to having the best running back in the country in Omarion Hampton. But I also wanted to touch on a point you mentioned, the wide receivers for Carolina, not including the tight ends. The 3 worst graded players for players that played over 20 snaps, according to Pro Football Focus, were Carolina's starting receivers. So it was J.J. Jones, Christian Hamilton, and let me get that last name. J.J. Jones, Kobe Paysor, and Christian Hamilton were Carolina's 3 lowest graded players. When you're watching the receivers, how much of this is a receiver issue? How much of this is a quarterback issue? Because I'm kind of the opinion neither side is really helping out the other right now.
In my observation, I personally think Chip Lindsey called the game a little bit different when Harrell was in versus Criswell. I think when Criswell's in, we can do more traditional college football sets where it's 2x2 and the receivers are running the route tree. I mean, you saw more of that true drop back where we're running, mirrored routes on both sides, and Criswell's delivering the ball on time because he can make every intermediate and short throw so I think if he starts going forward, I think it'll help our receivers more just because they are running more routes traditionally that they are accustomed to running. And I just look at the receivers and I don't see any threats. I don't see, and it's tough because JJ has had production in the past, but it was because he was the second or third option. We had Josh Downs, he had Tez Walker, he had all these other options. He had Drake May throwing him the ball. So it's going to be interesting to see, if Harrell's the guy. I mean, if Criswell's the guy going forward, how much true drop back we're actually going to implement in the game plan. I don't think we need to stray away from our number 1 option, our number 2 option, our number 3 option being running the ball and using the tight ends. I don't expect the production from the receiver room to, grow with leaps and bounds. And now you're going to see 2 or 3 of our starting receivers have over 60 yards in a game. I think they're going to be used sparingly, but I do think that they'll, have more attention their way because Criswell can deliver them a ball in a timely and accurate manner.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the receiver snaps play out as the season goes on, because you mentioned, I think last year, this was outside of Tez Walker, this was a average receiving room, and Drake May kind of propelled them to be above average or even a good receiving room. So right now you don't have the crutch of having this generational type talent at quarterback. So you're seeing an average receiving room play out as a average receiving room. And I don't think they're helping out the quarterbacks. I don't think the quarterbacks are helping them out. There's very little separation, a lot of tight windows. You have 5 drops in the Central game. Drops are starting to kind of come back, and receivers are making catches look a lot tougher than they probably are. And when you're looking at some of the guys behind them, it's the Jordan Ships, it's the Chris Cullivers, just to see what do you have with these guys? Because if you're not getting the production from your seniors and guys that are going to be gone from the program no matter what at the end of the year, at some point I think the coaching staff is going to start to weigh that, and especially in this transfer portal era age where it's like, hey, if I'm not playing here at North Carolina and our receivers aren't really that good, what's to say that those guys aren't going to look at other schools and other schools come calling to them and being like, hey, you're not playing here. We can give you a shot. We can have a quarterback for you. But yeah, I think the game plan right now, the best game plan you have is hand the ball off to Omarion Hampton. He gets 25 carries, 210 yards on the ground, 8.4 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns. Any words for how good Omarion Hampton is?
I mean, we could get on this podcast every week and just glow about the greatness of Hampton. Just like the last 2 seasons, it was each week we could talk about Drake each and every week about, this performance that he had. But I think we'll beat a dead horse. Everyone in the country knows, all of our fans know, our staff knows, the opposing teams know how good Hampton is. But just to see him do it over and over and over again, he's a true workhorse. He's a no nonsense type of guy. Like, he doesn't show emotion, positive or negative. He just runs right through you, maybe points first down, and then jogs back to the huddle and does it over again. It's good to see him bounce back from getting knocked out of the game last week. It's going to take a lot to knock that guy out of a game, especially in a competitive game. So I think Davion, he ran the ball well again. I'm looking forward to seeing the transfer from USC. I'm blanking on his name right now. Barlow. I'm interested to see how he looks when we, get him back. But yeah, we can speak all day about Hampton, but he's once again just showing how valuable he is. And I personally think, we've been talking about this. We can run the ball. Our offensive line, we're going to get some guys back, but we cover them up well, and that's he's our bell cow, and we got to feed him and get all the carries out of him we can in these next 10 games.
Yeah, I think when you talk about Omarion Hampton, especially in this NIL transfer portal era, I think you have to commend him every week for sticking by the Tar Heels and knowing that he probably got offered 3 times, 4 times the amount, but he wanted to stay for his hometown team. And then you talk about on the injury front, I was talking to people in the program who was like, it was 50-50 whether Omarion Hampton was even going to play against NC Central, but he wants to capitalize every week that he gets the chance to play in front of the UNC fans and in front of Kenan Stadium, and he wants to put on a show for everybody that comes out there. So yeah, I think at the very least with this North Carolina team, you have a star in the making, a star already in Omarion Hampton. But Shot, that takes us to our sponsors. Shout out, we got 2 new sponsors for the Shot and Vipp podcast. It's 2 locally owned restaurants to Chapel Hill. Every time I go back to Chapel Hill, I make sure to stop there, and they're part of what makes Chapel Hill so special and adds to that college town charm. The first one, Lucha Tigre. You go to Lucha Tigre, you mention Inside Carolina, you get 10% off their food. Family-friendly restaurant fusing Latin and Asian cuisine. It's right on MLK Boulevard in Chapel Hill. Shot, what's your go-to at Lucha Tigre?
I mean, every time I go there, I get everything on the menu. Like, I go with an empty stomach because I know I'm going to get General Tso's chicken. You got to ask for the white sauce. I get this empanadas. I get the green beans. I'll get, their chicken wings are really good. They got a beef bulgogi dish that's really good. They got good drinks there. The atmosphere is great. If you haven't been to Lucha Tigre, I'm telling you, you won't regret it. Qua is the owner, and he is one of the biggest Tar Heel fans of all time. He's got an unbelievable story. I think he was born in Vietnam and came over here and fell in love with the Tar Heels. And now he is, catering for the football and basketball team and women's soccer and women's field hockey. He's just an unbelievable guy. He's a great story of hard work and just, the loyalty and dedication. And just, I would put on my hand of 5 best people I know in the world, and Qua is one of them.
Wow.
So I promise you, Qua is you'll just sit down, ask for Qua. If you never met him, he'll find some connection, and he'll know your aunt or your cousin or your sister or whoever, your grandma. He's one of the most relatable people of all time, and I got a lot of love for that guy. So I'm glad we're doing some deals with him.
Yeah, and it's all people that you want to root for. And you go back to Chapel Hill, and there's so many like locally owned restaurants closing all the time, but it's the restaurants like Lucha Tigre and the next restaurant too, Italian Pizzeria 3. IP3 is a Chapel Hill tradition. It's owned by brothers Angelo and Vincenzo, and they've been serving up authentic Italian pizza in Chapel Hill since 1980. IP3 has a full menu of fresh dough pizza and other Italian specialties. I go to IP3 for soccer matches, for football games. I go there as much as possible, and it's the same thing as Lucha Tigre. It's people that you want to root for, and when you go to IP3 and you're talking to Vincenzo and you're talking to Angelo, it does have this family atmosphere. And then on top of that, you are getting great food, and it's right on Franklin Street. You can't beat it.
Support local businesses, baby. With the commercialization of Chapel Hill, with all these, influx of, we gotta stay local, to our roots and to the people that have, put in the hard work and have survived COVID. I know Lucha Tigre, especially during 2020, there was a chance that they weren't going to make it, but the local community kind of helped them out, and Qua did whatever he could to make it work, and he's back thriving and better than ever.
Yeah, between Qua, Angelo, Vincenzo, these are people that bleed Carolina blue. If you ever meet them, it's people that the Chapel Hill community needs. They support the athletic program. They support us at Inside Carolina, and we want you guys to support the people that support us. And finally, Old Reliable, Johnny T-shirt. You can visit them on Franklin Street. If you're not going to be in Chapel Hill, you could go online to johnnytshirt.com. They have everything that the Carolina fan could possibly want: the hats, the T-shirts, the jerseys, you name it, they've got it. Great people, great customer service. And don't forget, Inside Carolina premium subscribers save 10% off their orders. Support local business. Shot, you couldn't have said it better myself.
Yep.
And
I could run for president.
Yeah.
That's all you got to say.
And then, Shot, getting back to the podcast, let's switch sides of the ball, go from offense to defense. The defense for North Carolina, what did you make of their performance on Saturday?
Ugly first drive. But after that, they bounced back, and they played a good game. The couple things that I'm really liking from our defensive players are number one is how hard we're playing, and I think that starts with 2 guys. I think it's Power Eccles and Des Evans. Those are the 2 standards for how hard you are supposed to play defense. And you turn on any snap, and they are busting their ass, and they are flying to the football, and they can't be blocked. So I think our defense kind of feeds off those 2 guys, but we've created a culture of playing really hard football. And, Huzzy, Kaleb Cost, Amari Campbell, the D-line, we're rotating, we're more fresh. So just seeing us how hard we are playing, how fast we are running to the ball. We're getting off blocks well. We're tackling well. This is back-to-back podcasts of me saying we are tackling really, really well from all levels of the defense. I saw Marcus Allen have some good plays. Kaleb Cost has some good tackles. Huzzy, obviously you expect our linebackers to be good tacklers, but that's been very noticeable to me is when we're making first impact on the ball carrier in the open field, we're getting them on the ground. And it doesn't always have to look pretty. It doesn't always have to be a knockout shot. But if you can limit the explosive plays by making contact in the open field and knocking that ball carrier down on first impact, then that's going to solve a lot of your problems. Our goal line and red zone defense has gotten significantly better than years past. I can I can name 3 or 4 times this season how when the opponent gets in the red zone, we're holding them to field goals, and even more so when they're getting down inside the 5, we've stopped them, from the offense from getting touchdowns at least 2 or 3 times. It's not going to be 100% rate, but if a team gets the ball inside the 5 and you make them kick a field goal 1 out of every 2, 1 out of every 3 times, that's very, very good defense. So, 2 times in the last 2 weeks, the opponent has gotten the ball to the 1 yard line and we've held them to a field goal. First and goal on the 1 and they're kicking a field goal. That's great goal line defense. So situationally, we're playing better. Our third down defense has been really good all year. For the 3rd week in a row, we're under 30% of the offense converting on third down, which is a really good number. I'm sure we're top 20 in the country. I think the turnovers will come. I know Jeff Collins is laying in bed at night, how do we get more turnovers? But turnovers are contagious, and Kaleb Cost interception in the third or fourth quarter was an unbelievable play. He was a zone defender, buzz flat player, sunk underneath an out route that wasn't even his man. Just a phenomenal play from a young guy that's getting better. So I'm very encouraged by our defense. You look at the stats, 10 points. It doesn't. I mean, that's what you expect playing against NC Central, but the physicality we're playing with, the tackling ability, the tracking angles, that's got me encouraged. So I'm going to be very positive on the defense because they are impressing me.
Yeah, the one player that I was glad to see get that sack on Saturday, you mentioned him, it was Des Evans, because when you're watching the film version of this team, the Minnesota game, the Charlotte game, and now this NC Central game, what Des Evans is doing on the field hasn't always translated this season to putting up, the Ritzy like stat numbers. But Ritzy doesn't get 5 sacks if Des Evans isn't being as disruptive as he's being, and Des Evans being disruptive is opening a lot of things for this defense. So I think for the fans, he's a player that you can't really just look at his sack numbers or his tackle numbers or tackles for a loss numbers and get the full story for how he's playing, because he is disruptive and wrecking offensive game plans with a lot of ease out there with his effort and intensity every play. And then the other player that you mentioned that I'm glad you mentioned, Kaleb Cost. Can you just explain to the listener the difficulties of playing the nickel position at the college level and how Cost is doing so far through 3 games?
Yeah, I think he's going to be I think he's an NFL player. I don't know his baseball background, and I know that he has some potential to go play in the MLB. But this guy this is his 4th career start, right? He's a second-year player. First of all, you look at his physical stature. Like, he's 6'1", 195 pounds. Like, that's the prototype nickelback star position. Um, I personally think it's harder to play nickel than it is to play outside corner. Here's why: because there's more skill sets involved with playing the nickel. Kaleb Cost, first of all, on just his natural alignment, he is to the field mainly lined up against a slot receiver. Okay, so his first skill he has to do is cover a Josh Downs type in the slot, and being a bigger guy, that's tough. You're asked to play man to man against a slot. If they flex a tight end to the field and he's in the slot, now you have to cover a tight end. So you're having to cover all these different body types. We ask him to blitz, so he's got to be a great tackler. He, we involve him in the run game, so he's got to be physical enough to withstand pulling offensive linemen, and just the skill set to be able to cover man to man, play zone, cover tight ends man to man, be involved in the run game, and blitz. That takes a special player. Um, he's he's super talented. He's young. We've seen him get beat in man-to-man coverage a few times this year, but those reps will only help him grow. Like, he's getting beat on a slot fade with no safety help and man-to-man on third down, or he's getting beaten on a wheel route. And, that's going to happen from time to time, but his instincts at that position, um, his ability to shake off a play that happened, previously in the first quarter, letting up a 30-yard pass and just have that amnesia where he bounces back and is like, I'm not going to let that affect me and just go play the next play. So I'm super high on him. Like I said, he tackles really well. He had 2 PBUs. He had half a sack, and that highlight reel interception. He's gonna get beat man to man on some throws, but that to me is the hardest position to play man to man defense, because you're on an island with a ton of space. The receiver can go any which way, right? He and his the throw from the quarterback to a slot receiver is the easiest throw. Usually it's an in breaking route over the ball, and that's what the quarterback sees and throws the best for the most part. So um, I'm super high on that kid. His competitive nature, his ball skills, his tackling ability, like, he's a complete player, and I think ultimately he will get better at man-to-man coverage as the year goes on, and he's an NFL player. He 100% is an NFL player.
All right, let's take a quick break so I can remind everybody about our friends over at Congruity. Congruity is the leading provider for Tar Heel business owners, payroll, HR, and employee benefit needs. Inside Carolina listeners can get a free payroll and HR assessment by emailing Matt at Congruity. Email is matt@congruityhr.com. That email again is matt@congruityhr.com. All right, let's get back to the episode. Yeah, when you look at the Pro Football Focus grades, and you kind of have to take the Pro Football Focus grades with a grain of salt, knowing that they might not know the coverages or what exactly is happening on a play. But overall, you could at least begin to use those as some kind of framework. When you look at the Pro Football Focus grades from the NC Central grade, of the defenders that played over 20 snaps, the highest grade, Tyler Thompson, at that outside linebacker rush type position, grades out at a 78.9 in 35 snaps. Travis Shaw grades out 77.2. Javari Ritzy 71.2, and then Kaleb Cost was the 4th highest defender out of those defenders that played 20 or more snaps with a 70.7. So 3 of your top 4 defenders are these young guys. What have you kind of seen from this defense, where all of a sudden you do kind of have this influx of young talent, but also meshing with your older guys, to where you're not just relying on seniors, or you're not relying on these upperclassmen, and you do have some production from the younger guys?
It's great. It's great to see. It's what we've been talking about the last few years of, number one, getting production outside of guys that have been established and started, 2-3 years in the program. You look at Amari Campbell, and I talked about him weeks ago, of making splash plays at the off the ball linebacker position, sacks, TFLs, quarterback hurries, interceptions, forced fumbles, and he's making one of those plays a week, and he's still playing with a club on his hand. I thought Travis Shaw actually looked pretty damn good in this game. I mean, it's a game where he is, physically more gifted than every offensive lineman on North Carolina Central, but you want to see him make more splash plays of TFLs and sacks and things of that nature. But it's great to see, the mix of veteran players, Power, Dez, Javari, and the influx of young talent, Kaleb Cost, Amari Campbell, Marcus Allen to some extent. He's played a lot of football, but he's still a junior. Um, it's I really want to give Coach Collins a lot of credit. He's done a great job with the product they put on, you know, on display so far. A big stat to me is the rushing yards per game. I know we played 3 games, but holding them to under 70 is a great number. And you know, all you can do is produce against the team that you're playing against, and our run defense has produced at a high level, and I think we'll continue to do that.
3-0, Carolina back in action this Saturday noon kickoff from Chapel Hill against James Madison on the ACC network. We will be back next week to break it all down. Shotman, appreciate the time as always, and appreciate everybody watching and listening.
Appreciate it, Vipp. Always a pleasure. Glad we could get this one. With everything that was going against us, we figured out a way to get it done. Just
they threw adversity at us, and we found a way.
My motto for the year has been win ugly, grind out games, and that's kind of how we did this podcast. We found a way to get it done. We podcasted ugly, but it's a win.
Where are you going to be next week?
I'll be in Tennessee next week.
Wow. Okay.
I'm going to the Morgan Wallen concert at Neyland Stadium, so we'll have to figure out a different time to record this because next Sunday night I will be with an ice cold beverage in my hand, listening to Morgan, singing along with him. So
hopefully that 5-star hotel in Tennessee has some good Wi-Fi.
If not, I got to call Elon Musk to get that Starlink. So we'll figure it out. I got a week to get it right.